All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Wednesday, so middle of the week, and usually I'm in a good mood or a better mood anyway, but today hasn't been a great day. I have mentioned maybe before we're doing some work at the house, we actually have to replace the old trusty oven that served us so well for over 2 decades, and one that was installed long before we purchased the home we live in now. Unfortunately, it went the way of probably pretty much every other 40-year-old, I think just exactly 40-year-old oven. It finally just conked out. Couldn't keep it going anymore. And they don't make them like they used to in a lot of different ways. And one way they don't make them like they used to is the dimensions. The space where that oven was just isn't built to accommodate. It's the size does not accommodate today's ovens, which are either wider or smaller. So it's a real challenge figuring out what to do at this point. And every solution is time consuming and expensive, but we're fortunate we can afford it. I can imagine what it's like for folks who are so many Americans, just, making do every week, every month, barely covering expenses, and having a big expense like a new oven must be very, very challenging. This is an issue we saw Zoran Mamdani exploiting the affordability crisis, the challenges that every American, not every, but I think the majority of Americans face, just getting to the next week, to the next month, to the next year. And Democrats must discuss it. They must center that issue if they want to win elections. My view is they aren't on the side of the American consumer. They aren't on the side of the American worker. We know the Republicans aren't. You got to vote for Green. I mean, with exceptions. Obviously, if there's a really good Democrat like Mamdani, then vote for him. If there's a okay Democrat like AOC, I don't know what you do in a case like that. We're going to talk about. I wouldn't vote for her, and we'll get to her. The show, though, yeah, I struggled. Well, I wouldn't say I struggled, but I was debating really how to promote, market, what have you, today's program via the ever popular thumbnail. And it turns out that when I saw a headline from the New York Times that Israel continues to demolish Gaza months after the ceasefire, I felt I have to talk about that story. So Israel is still demolishing Gaza building by building, and you can see the image there. I took a screenshot of the 5-second GIF or video, that short that the New York Times put up there, and you can see the explosion just blowing up a block. It says building by building, but in that explosion, which was occurred apparently on October 30 after the ceasefire was declared, see a number of buildings all right next to each other. This is just so horrific. Over and over. I mean, I've been talking about it. I talk about it every day for 2 years. I center this, and my view is not rare. It's not unique. I'm not the only one who holds this. I think probably most Americans don't want us to be supporting Israel, and yet we continue to do it. We don't stop them. We don't rein them in. We are absolutely, our government is complicit in the most monstrous of crimes. I don't know what you do with that. I don't know where we go with this. It is extraordinarily frustrating. I ask the question because I don't have the answer. I know we have people organizing. I've gone with Code Pink. I've worked with Code Pink. I've been to marches. I've confronted legislators. Guy I went to college with, graduate of my undergraduate school. I wasn't friends with him. I don't know if I ever even met him. Maybe saw him at a party. I don't know. And I left a note in his office Doug Bennett, not going to hide anything, Colorado senator, saying, hey, what you're doing, your support for Israel totally contravenes what we learned in college at a progressive liberal arts school. You're supporting the devastation, the destruction of an entire body of people. This is not what we learned at your school. A school, by the way, your school, my school, where your father, Doug Bennett's father, was actually the president of the university. I don't believe he was when I was there. But shortly after I graduated, Doug Bennett became the president. And I think when his son, there were two, there's Michael Douglas Bennett and Douglas Michael Bennett. One's the son, one's the father. I don't know how they do it, but regardless in terms of their names. But I believe the son graduated, Feast graduated when Pear was president, I believe, because he's a little younger than I am. I mean, it's just so awful. And how you can possibly have gotten the kind of education that I think many of us in this country, many elites got. This, what they support, what so many Americans support, what that we, at least at the top levels, the elites, what they champion is completely antithetical to Enlightenment teaching, to Enlightenment instruction that we were fortunate enough to get. I think that's part of the reason why there is this war in the universities, why Trump and his minions and, with little pushback from Democrats have basically taken control of curricula in liberal arts schools. Because even though those colleges and universities are very beholden to empire, have supported empire, have taken billions of dollars from the military-industrial complex, grants from for-profit companies, government grants to develop weapon systems. They do all of that. They've been doing all of that for decades. They still teach often lessons that are not, consistent with that might makes right, money makes the world go round ideology that ultimately underpins the schools. So they take a lot of money from the worst people, the world destroyers, the emperors, the empire builders, the would-be emperors. They take their money, they help them, they promote their ambitions, but they also do teach the students something different. Well, I guess Trump doesn't want those teachings anymore, so he's stopping that foursquare. We got to go in a different direction, folks. We got to vote for somebody else. We can't vote Clinton, Bush, Clinton, or whatever we did. I can't remember how that all went down. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, Bush, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. I mean, I'm not seeing any trends there that look any good to me. What's happening now in Gaza? It is just so absolutely horrific. The scale of ongoing destruction is stark across eastern Gaza and areas under Israeli control. Satellite imagery reveals the entire blocks, and that was what that video showed, have been erased since the ceasefire, as well as swaths of farmland and agricultural greenhouses. Don't give Trump gets no credit for that ceasefire. It's just more destruction by Israel. Now, the death count isn't as high. But does it matter? They're being systematically destroyed. An entire group of people. Yes, it matters. Of course it matters. If somebody's alive today who would be dead otherwise, yes, that's good. But it's only good relative to the ultimate evil. We have to do something differently, folks. And I don't really have an answer. I really, I watch other people's podcasts. I watch whoever, and I don't get answers. Vote Democratic. That's not helping. That hasn't helped. Again, vote green to the extent you can. But I think that in the end, if you do a vote blue no matter who strategy, which we're going to see is being promoted, you're basically telling the Democratic Party, do whatever all you have to do is just that much less evil, that much less corrupt, that much less horrific than Trump and the Republicans, and we'll vote for you. You'll have our support. And what someone could say, well, yeah, hell, you just said if one person is alive today who would have been dead otherwise, that's a good thing. Yeah, but either way, we're going down the wrong road very, very quickly. We have to reverse course. And if you vote blue, no matter who, you ain't reversing course. You just ain't. You want to see if I can get that. It was amazing that New York Times, I really thought the article, I give them a ton of credit actually for putting it up there. I mean, this is definitely doesn't jibe, with their mission, which I think they view, certainly the top management, is to, cape for Israel, make excuses. We're not going to totally pretend Israel is this wonderful force for good, but we're certainly going to minimize their worst actions. We're going to, regardless of how bad they are, we're always going to remind people that this all started on October 6th with Hamas. And they kind of don't do that here. They just tell you just how bad Israel is. And I give them credit for that. I really do. Now, we have to recognize it's not just Israel, it's the U.S. with Israel. But they do get a little bit, in my view, of credit. And now as I'm looking through the front page, I'm frantically trying to find the front page. Actually, I'm not trying to find it. I have it. They've messed it up a little bit. It's not what I saw before, so I can't quite find the story. But I will, because there was a map on there I want to show you. Don't forget, since I got you here, don't forget, subscribe now, please. Click that like button as well. Any comments are always welcome. Join us on Facebook. The more interaction, the more engagement you have with our videos here, I guess I should say my videos, but I say our because they're yours, they're mine, they're ours, my guests. We're all part of it. We're all in this together. Any engagement whatsoever does help us cut through the algorithm. And I got to tell you, I am somewhat suspicious. I do wonder whether my politics really do cause YouTube to somewhat deprecate this. I don't know. Maybe that isn't the case, but it does feel like there's less engagement than I've seen of late. And I think that may well be because there's a lot of pressure not to center the victims of empire. And that is what we do here every single show, is center the victims of empire, whether they're domestic, whether they're working class, whether they're consumers, whether they're Palestinians, Venezuelans, possibly now it looks like Greenlanders. They're all, that's what this show is about. And we'd love to hear from you. 240-242-5646, as I mentioned, 240-242-5646. And if I can ever get to the Israel, I will. Not finding it. Let's just move on then. We'll get to that tomorrow. Genocide. I don't know there's any other word to call this systematic destruction of Gaza and Palestine, right? Or the West Bank by Israel. It's just a crime that really we haven't seen the like of, the systematic destruction of this entity. I'd like to call it a country, this nation of people by Israel. A multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual community utterly ripped apart by Israel with our support. I used to say, till after the wake of October 6th, Israel's reprisals, that the most important challenge we face is the ongoing ecocide. I call it global warming, call it global burning, the global Holocaust, are all fair terms, all accurate terms. Because of the direct murder of tens of thousands of people and the dehousing of millions by the United States and Israel, I've pivoted to put that number one. But we cannot lose sight. We should not let that prevent us from recognizing that the climate catastrophe continues unabated. And I've put Zeke Housefather up before. I think he's a lot of times on X. This is actually from what is the other one? Blue Sky, right? Blue Sky. So here's what we found out. I got the report from a Carbon Brief. I got my own email and I was going to use that, but then Housefather saved my bacon by putting this up. 2025, warmest ocean heat content. So what I understand that to mean is that there's more energy now in our oceans than there has ever been in recorded history that we're aware of, certainly. And they, I don't know how they measure that. Probably just thermometers that are in the water, right? All over the place. That's my guess. Tide is second warmest surface temp. So the ocean's surface isn't necessarily quite as warm or hot as it's been in the past. I think the reason why we're fine, even though the depths, when you factor in the depths, the ocean depths, it's warmer, the water has more energy. But I think the reason you may see slightly less hot surface temperature is because of the melting glaciers in Antarctica and Greenland. So when the glaciers melt, water that's just above freezing is released into the ocean, and it's at the surface. But that's really cold water, right? The coldest water can be before it becomes ice. It's a little below 32 because with the salt, it reduces the freezing point by a bit. But even so, you've got all this melt water that's very cold relative to the rest of the water in the oceans. And so that causes us to see not the warmest water surface around the world. Tied for second. Second warmest troposphere, I think that's the air above us. Record high sea levels and GHGs, greenhouse gas, in the, per millions of particles in the air. The higher percentage of greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, whatever. And then record low winter Arctic ice. So that's what you're seeing. Thank you, Zeke Housefather, for telling us that. What I can just so hear the deniers claiming, see, it wasn't the hottest. It's not getting hotter. It wasn't the hottest. Look at that chart. You can see it's going down at the end, so therefore it's not getting hotter. I mean, you know what to do with that argument. There's still going to be some variation, but the trend is very steep up. And saying it's the second or tied for second hottest year ever, when the hottest year was last year, and the only other year that is even in the ballpark was 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, is hardly anything but proof, more proof more proof positive that it's human activity that's causing this ever hotter temperatures on Earth and more and more destabilization. I heard Chris Hedges talking about this. He was saying, what we're seeing in this country, the tighter and tighter stranglehold over dissent, over our lives, over our jobs, and over our borders is because the elites recognize that the utter destruction that we are wreaking on our planet, which is, making more and more of the global south uninhabitable, unlivable, is going to drive ever more migration north. And to prevent these hordes of desperate people who are without any other recourse because of flooding, because of burning, because of desertification, to prevent them from overrunning our borders, they're going to just, put up the wall and start shooting more and more people. If someone steps up and say, these are human beings, they'll get shot too, as we saw in Minneapolis. So the climate catastrophe, the climate crisis, beyond the harm, the devastation it's doing to the web of life, the sixth great extinction that the Anthropocene is responsible for, the Anthropocene age of humans is responsible. Beyond all that, it also appears to be a major driver of even more deprivation of our civil liberties. We're going to take this on. We're going to figure out ways to address this crisis. I've heard people show some optimism. I know that there was some actions taken by previous administrations, not by Trump, that were at least window dressing, were at least designed to suggest that we as a nation were taking action. They weren't effective. But Trump is worse in certain ways, for sure, being in complete denial, changing the procedure, trying to change the standards by which government, or by which, NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act, various studies are done to determine whether projects can go forward. They're now using this new standard where only economic impact is considered, not human lives. In the past, it used to be you want to build a refinery in Louisiana. Then you'd have to do a study. You'd have to do an impact study, and you'd have to present it to the state regulators and the government, national regulators, show how many people would be harmed, what the likelihood would be to the lifespan of the people in the area, how many people would be likely to die prematurely. That would have to be factored in, along with a lot of other costs, like the likelihood of an oil spill, the damage that would do, damage to land, to agricultural land. All of that would have to be factored in, and then a decision would be made whether to issue a permit. Well, now Trump is saying, no, we don't need to look at whether these projects reduce human lifespan or people die. We don't have to worry about that. The only thing we should be looking into is a cost benefit, purely economic, on purely economic grounds. So yeah, if, say, farmland is plowed under, if there's some kind of likely damage to, say, a port that we use, that we can consider whether to issue the permit. But we're not going to worry about how many people are going to die. That's Trump. Completely denying there's even a climate holocaust, or that there's any even impact by humans on the planet's environment. Meanwhile, using the melting Arctic as a reason to go to war with Denmark and steal Greenland. So yeah, Trump is really, really bad. Under Trump, U.S. adds fuel to a heating planet. The president's embrace of fossil fuels and withdrawal from the global fight against climate change will make it hard to keep warming at safe levels. Scientists said, I think this was in Monday's newspaper. And when I read that, I thought, wait a second. We haven't kept warming at safe levels. They're not at safe levels. I mean, at less dangerous levels than they're already at, or at maintaining them at not the most worst case scenario, which I suppose is the complete melting of Greenland and big chunks of Antarctica. But no, we're already past safe levels. And, the Times, I guess, doesn't want to say keep warming. It's, make it harder to keep warming from getting worse and worse and worse. They don't want to necessarily say that because then that sort of acknowledges, well, under Biden, we didn't really make much of a fight. Under Obama, we didn't make any. I mean, Obama drill, as I understand it, he was the drilling king, right? Until Trump. Trump's drilled more oil in one term than any president before him. Obama drilled more oil in one term. He was a two-term president, but I guess over his 2 terms, he extracted more oil than any president. Then Trump came in, one term, drilled more than in any other 4-year period, and then Biden broke that record. So they're all guilty of ecocide. Our presidents. Vote green. That's all I can tell you. What about the institutions that are supposed to be protecting us? They're standing up for the environment, recognizing just how bad things are, trying to stop the worst impacts of the human activity on our planet. Are they fighting for us? I remember when the Sunrise Movement came out, I was kind of excited about it. I thought they were a kind of new and different. You had to be under 35. I think at one point you had to be under 30. Maybe they raised it to 35 because some of their original people were getting too old. They've been disappointing me of late. I saw this headline. This is in the Intercept. So, according to the Intercept, which is a really good, they have a lot of good stories, and they're under tremendous attack from various right-wing groups and right-wing funded groups to force them to stop their reportage, and it'd be a terrible loss if that happens. I was a little surprised when I saw this headline: Sunrise Movement founded to fight climate change pivots to fighting Trump. I was surprised because I thought they'd already pivoted to fighting Trump. This is, you can see, they're October 2, 25. And I saw that just recently, but that really surprised me because they'd already pivoted. They'd already given up the fight against the Democratic Party. They'd already given up the Sunrise Movement, that is, had decided it wasn't going to take on Democrats who support ever more drilling, ever more extraction. They were just going to fight Trump. That's what the Sunrise Movement had already decided long before this article. So it kind of, but they announced it, I guess. I think they announced it. It was, well, look, they're trying to raise money. If you're the head of this group, I think Aru, I could be wrong, is making $200,000 a year. Now, maybe it's not quite that much, but it's a lot. She's doing pretty darn well. And to make that kind of money, you got to get either grants or you got to raise money. And even if you ask money, from donor, you got to get donor money. Well, Sunrise's people are under 35 mostly, or they're all of them. Their members are anyway. They don't have a lot of money. Most of them. And if you're going to go after the Democratic Party, the more affluent members of the Sunrise community are going to say, well, wait a second, the Democrats, why are you going after them? Yeah, maybe their policies aren't perfect, but hey, the policies that you want would take away my privileges. Yeah, I want to stop global warming to a degree. I mean, I like to go have my ski vacations in Vail, and I don't get to do that anymore. But you're saying we got to all go solar and we got to consume less and we got to because that's the way you can stop or at least put a serious dent in the climate crisis is by making fossil fuels much, much more expensive. And, these Democratic aligned, relatively affluent, upper middle class people, they have their stock in ExxonMobil and they're not going to want to just see the complete repudiation of all fossil fuels. That's not in their interest, they think. So if you go after the Democratic Party because they're not aggressive enough, then you're going to lose financial support. And you need that financial support to pay the salaries to people who are pretty happy making their six figures, doing a lot more interesting work, at least compared to their peers, making more money doing it. So, no, you're not going to take on the Democratic Party. Aru Shani Ajay told The Intercept, the path to climate lies through getting rid of the authoritarian government we're in. So I do agree with that. But a single-minded focus on Trump as the problem is fundamentally dishonest. The problem is the corporatocracy. The problem is the oligopoly, and both parties are complicit. But you can see why Aru might say that. Well, look what a friend Joe Biden was. In a striking success for us, the law, the Inflation Recovery Act of 22, contained parts of Sunrise's top priority, the Green New Deal. I guess that's true. We did see more investment in solar and wind. We did see new projects coming online. That was, as far as it goes, good. But as we've discussed on this program before, what really matters, hey, Ken, good to see you there in the chat. What really matters here, in the end, is consumption reduction. And the Biden administration pursued an all-of-the-above approach. So yes, they did promote clean, green renewables, but they also green-lighted many, many new fossil fuel projects. They also green-lighted more drilling in the Arctic. In fact, they pushed it through in a budget standoff with the Republicans on raising the debt ceiling. Biden pushed that through. More drilling in the Arctic, the Willow Creek Project. Biden, Jeffries, Schumer pushed through the Mountain Valley Pipeline, despite the fact that courts had repeatedly said it violates various environmental laws. So Biden was a huge part of the problem. Biden saw the war with Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine war, as an opportunity to build up the United States liquefied natural gas industry. Biden was a huge part of the problem. But you ain't going to hear that from Sunrise. They're tied to the Democratic Party's purse strings. This is where you start to wonder, is there anything we can do? Where's our hope? Where's the options? I don't know that they're out there. Hey, Don, I see you in the Facebook video chat, I guess you would call it. Give me a call. I want to talk to people. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Why now? It's really not a pivot, by the way. Again, Sunrise already had made it their mission to defeat Trump, even if it meant supporting Kamala, even if it meant supporting agents of the fossil fuel industry. That's Sunrise. But why now? Why make this announcement? Well, according to The Intercept, Sunrise is making the change public just a week after Trump sent a chilling message to activists who oppose him. Investigate nonprofits and their funders. And I think they're specifically looking at George Soros there. Well, obviously that's horrific. That's awful that Trump is doing that. But going after their money, hey, that's the last straw. We're not going to ever break with the Democratic Party because, we get supporting them provides us with a certain level of, I guess, gravitas, apparent influence, seat at the table, kind of, sort of. We get our priority mentioned in the big legislative package that in the end doesn't reduce our carbon footprint, which is what we have to do. Sunrise, 240-242-5646. And just to show you what I'm talking about, how Sunrise did not change its policy. From the 24 election, from before the 24 election, their mission was to target Trump. They centered Trump, not good climate policy. That was not Sunrise. If their mission, if they had centered good, smart energy policy, environmental policy, they would not have gotten off the couch to help Kamala Harris, who supported fracking, who made it clear she wasn't going to be an environmental champion and had never been an environmental champion. So they tried to split the baby. Yeah, well, we didn't really endorse Kamala. We just wanted people to know the stakes of this election, how important it was to defeat Trump. Not because we like Kamala, but, well, she was a lot better than he was. So we're going to talk to people about why it's so important that they vote for her, regardless of how bad Harris is. And I actually talked to Aru about this. I had an opportunity. I don't think she was happy about it, but I pushed her to discuss it. And she said, I don't care how bad Harris is. Trump's worse. Okay. It's all about the stakes of the election for climate change. If they were really concerned about the stakes of the election for climate change, they would have supported Jill Stein for president. There was a clean green energy candidate, and her name is Jill Stein. So here's what Yara Changnyet-Levin said. It's clear young voters are engaged and understand the critical importance of this election. And we are seeing very high numbers of young people not only commit to voting, but also to turning out voters. So that sounds good. Now, it doesn't say who they're going to vote for, which is kind of interesting. Can you imagine the opportunity there was in 24 to build support for the Green Party, to build a lasting movement in opposition to both war parties, to both fossil fuel extractor parties, to both anti-labor parties? There was a real opportunity there. And Sunrise just flushed it right down the toilet. And they knew there was an opportunity. They knew that they could build a real lasting power, a movement to take on the oligarchs. And they just said, we don't care. We don't care. We're Democrats. We're true blue. We're dyed in the wool. No matter how bad they are, no matter how much they ignore us, give us the back of the hand, approve terrible pipelines and projects in the Arctic, we're still going to support them. And they knew that that's not what their young voters, that's not what we wanted. well, not we, they wanted. Sunrise volunteers continue to hear young voters express concerns about Kamala Harris's stance on key issues, wanting her to deliver a strong climate plan. Here's a flash. She didn't. And support an arms embargo. She didn't. And this is both volunteers and voters. This is what Sunrise announced. This is from Sunrise's own release in 25, before the election in 24, right? So now more than a year ago, well over a year ago. They had an opportunity. This is a pretty well-funded organization. A lot of members. Great name, Sunrise. It's a great name, right? By the way, it's an appropriate name too because it's for young people, right? So, Sunrise is early in the day. I always think it's so funny. These senior homes are often called the Sunrise Centers. They should be called by all rights the Sunset Centers, right? I mean, the people in some of these, all of them in all the senior homes, they're a hell of a lot closer to the sunset than the sunrise, but obviously nobody wants to be reminded of that. I wouldn't want to be staying in the Sunset Center. I'm getting ready for the Sunrise Center, but I just think the name is pretty ironic. We had a chance, look, folks. This is what's so unfortunate, so unhappy for me. Is there was a chance to kind of build something, maybe. And those who had some influence, some money, just flushed it right down the toilet. It's really, really tragic, is what it is. It's flat out tragic. We'll talk more about people who have betrayed the mission to make life a little better for poor, struggling working people, for consumers, for workers. We'll talk about that. I thought this was a really interesting story. One of the areas where I struggle is anti-Semitism. You hear a lot of that there's all this terrible anti-Semitism out there. And I pretty much dismiss all of it. I have done that. I've said this is just not true. It's just made up. It's leveraging criticism of Israel, sometimes very strident criticism of Israel, sometimes criticism of Israel that arguably could be construed as anti-Semitic, but ultimately is driven not by animus towards Jews as Jewish people, but animus towards Jews as supporters of Israel. And I'm not going to call that anti-Semitism. If you assume that a Jew supports Israel and you make you criticize them, you attack Jews because you assume we support Israel, I don't call that anti-Semitic. I think it's misguided because lots of Jews don't support Israel. But the fact of the matter is, high-profile Jews, powerful Jews, rich Jews do support Israel. The ones you see in the news, the Stephen Millers of the world, obviously Netanyahu, the Josh Gottheimers, in Maryland here, the Ben Kramers, they support Israel. And they conflate consistently their Judaism with their Zionism, with their support for this genocidal state. So if somebody goes after a Jewish person or a group of Jewish people and attacks them because there's an assumption that they support Israel, I don't like that. I don't want people to assume I support Israel. I'm going to be very, very quick to disabuse you of that notion. But I don't think that's in and of itself proof of anti-Semitism. It's actually a not unreasonable assumption to make. Well, you're Jewish, you support Israel. You shouldn't support Israel. Israel is bad. You're supporting a criminal state. That's all true. I'm not going to like you. That's kind of under the logic. The one flaw in that logic is just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you support Israel. There is anti-Semitism, though. There is real anti-Semitism out there. even I know I talk to people about it and I say, hey, look, you're exaggerating, you're overstating it. That doesn't even sound like anti-Semitism to me. And a lot of times I hear stories that are, old, 10 years, 20, 30 years old, was like for me when I was a kid. Well, you're not a kid now. Things are different. But this, I have to say, I mean, I'm willing to give the students involved, a bit of the benefit of the doubt. But no, don't lie in the shape of a swastika on a football field and take a picture of it. That's anti-Semitism. It is. I mean, I'm not going to get all outraged. I don't think people should be expelled for this or whatever. I don't know how you deal with it. And that's really the question. How do you deal with a real example of anti-Semitism at a time when the Jewish state is committing a genocide? And I don't really have an answer. I love your thoughts. 240-242-5646. Again, we're here. The reason I do this show, and I get it, it's not sexy, the way you claim, there's all this fraud involving the Somali community in Minnesota, and that gets like 10 million hits, and this like sort of doofus, reaps the benefit because he had this high concept for a video. Let's tar this community, the Somali community, and we can get, we'll blow up, right? So that's not what we do here. We identify real problems and try to solve them, not create fake problems that will outrage people. I don't know what you do about this. And I posted this actually in this group I'm in on Facebook, where I quite a prolific, not prolific, but I post a lot at this group all about USA politics. And I like it because I like the group because they seem to have a mission somewhat similar to mine, which is, here's a problem, how do we solve it? So I asked them, I said, hey, got a lot of people in this group all about USA politics. And I didn't realize this. I don't get to just post a question that has to be approved, but it was approved. It's a good question. Israel and many of its defenders cynically use claims of anti-Semitism to silence critics of its murderous policies. Nevertheless, real anti-Semitism does exist, though the problem is far less widespread than ADL and the Holocaust Memorial Museum. Now, I use them because they have this definition, right, that basically is, if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. It's not quite criticism of Israel is tantamount to anti-Semitism, but criticizing Israeli policies and analogizing them to the Nazis is anti-Semitism, even if the policies are the same. Saying that this questioning the right of the state to exist is considered anti-Semitism. So the problem is far less widespread than ADL and the U.S. Holocaust Museum would have you believe, because they use bogus definitions of anti-Semitism and then claim, well, that's anti-Semitic when it isn't. But there is some. We saw those kids in the swastika. What do we do about it? What should we do about it? How should we respond to truly anti-Semitic acts while recognizing that Israel and its supporters both exaggerate and exacerbate the problem? In other words, when they're saying it's a problem, it's a much bigger problem than it is. So that's the exaggeration part. Exacerbate the problem because the policies that Israel is pursuing and the defense of those policies by many Jewish people is making a lot of other people hate Jews. So how do we deal with it? And I really don't know. I'd love to get your thoughts. I'll tell you how you shouldn't deal with it. I'll tell you the wrong response is from Alexandria. I don't know. She probably says Alexandria. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Her response is totally wrong. So here we go. Immediate assumption, this is anti-Semitic. Hey, so marching into a predominantly Jewish neighborhood and leading with a chant saying we support Hamas is a disgusting and anti-Semitic thing to do. Pretty basic. I thought Sabby Sabs had just the right take on this. It's incredibly condescending. It's incredibly self-righteous. Who the hell is AOC to be telling people who are witnessing a genocide in real time, that they shouldn't be supporting the group that actually did stand up to and take action against Israel. Now, we can fight, we can argue. I'm not going to defend what Hamas did. I think it was wrong. But I always say to those who are going to condemn Hamas, what were they supposed to do? They've done everything possible. They've gone to the UN. They go to every country. They say, stop it. Tell Israel to stop. Israel's killing our people. Israel's stealing our land. Israel's blowing up our buildings. Israel's, every now and then just committing yet another outrage. Israel's taking prisoners. Israel's torturing us. What are they supposed to do? Give me another answer besides just kill. So for AOC to center in that post, the oppressor is what is disgusting, is what is wrong. And fortunately, she got a lot of pushback, a lot of clapback. She showed she was quoting some video where they were saying, I listened to it, I was like, are they really saying we support Hamas or what? And they were. So yeah, probably not the right thing to say. But Hamas is like their one warrior, right? The one group that's fought back against their oppressors, their persecutors. You can't really, you can understand, can't you, why people who are under such terrible pressure, who are constantly being persecuted by this state, would say, well, yeah, we're going to support the group that fights for us, even if they fight dirty and they kill innocents too, just like Israel does. So Blakely had an excellent response. Are you planning on condemning the organization selling illegal Palestinian land? It's illegal. The land isn't illegal. It should be. Are you planning on condemning the organizations, right? This is the group that was chanting in support of Hamas was outside a synagogue in Queens, I believe, where there were land sales of illegally stolen Palestinian land. That is the first, that is the a priori fact. Before you get into whether it's okay to say we support Hamas, you got to recognize the people that are protesting something really, really evil that was happening in the synagogue. Pretty basic, AOC. Are you planning on condemning the organizations illegally selling Palestinian land? That's, I think, what you meant to say, which is what they're protesting, or nah. And then you see Zay Squirrel there. You will never be president. I know you think doing these epic Zionist clapbacks will get you the presidency, but it will never happen, never. And if you run, it will be the most humiliating experience of your life, and I will happily contribute to it. So look, AOC is not the worst. I think she probably does really believe in Medicare for all. I think she really gets how bad the climate catastrophe is, or at least she does to a degree. But in the end, she's going to keep her, she's going to keep her powder dry whenever it might negatively, in her view, impact her ambitions, which is, I guess, to be senator, to be governor, whatever it is, and then maybe ultimately president. And she sees the road to Albany, or the road to the U.S. Senate, or the road to the White House as requiring support from rich Zionists. It's clear, or at least not their absolute hate. And it's, why? Why would you think that, AOC? Didn't you just see Zoran Mamdani win? Didn't you see how much love he gets? And he's been the most overtly anti-Israel candidate. And he's not that anti-Israel. Wish he were. That's the wrong way to address anti-Semitism. What's the right way? I think what you have to do is you have to say, look, I think you talk to the people. I really do. I think that the best way to address it in that case is just not an outright blanket condemnation. These are evil people. You can never talk to them. The way Butch Ware says, if you support the ICE agent in Minneapolis who killed, I think his name is Jonathan Ross, who killed Renee Nicole Good, if you support him, then I'm not talking to you. You're not even really human. That's not the right answer. What you say to the people, the kids, I presume, who took that human swastika, who created it, the guy who took the picture, is you say, hey, what were you trying to accomplish here? What's your goal? Is it just to express that you hate Jews and you want them to be genocided? Is that what's going on here? And I would listen. If the answer were something like, look, we're seeing every day what Israel's doing to the Palestinian people. It's just exactly what Hitler did to the Jews. And Israel's a Jewish state. There's a Jewish star right in the flag, just like the yellow star that the Nazis made Jews wear in the concentration camps, the death camps. If they didn't kill them right away, they had to wear that yellow star, or they had to wear them in the street, right, to humiliate and embarrass them. That's what Israel does to the Palestinian people every day. So we're just like, hey, fair is fair. You know, if that's the attitude, I think you have to say, well, two wrongs don't make a right. What Israel's doing is absolutely wrong. It's absolutely evil. They're crimes against humanity. We get it. But you can't say that because of what a country is doing, every single Jewish person should be killed. And that was the Nazi position. If you want to protest Israel, if you want to stand against Israel, here's ways that we can do it together. We'll work with you on that. That would be, I think, the best response. That's the best I can come up with, is try to find common ground. Now, you can't always find common ground with people. But in this case, the animus towards Jews, I believe, is understandable given the efforts by Netanyahu, by the elites in this country, to equate anti-Israel feeling with anti-Semitism. All right, 240-242-5646. The economy isn't doing great. We are seeing growth. It apparently is just because of the AI investments. Payrolls are not rising as expected. Unemployment rate fell a little bit, but the reason it fell in December, as I understand it, is just fewer people are seeking jobs. The actual percentage of Americans working is lower than it's been. It's actually dropped, right? So yes, unemployment dropped, but unemployment is the number of people who are seeking jobs but don't have one, not anyone who isn't working of a certain age. So, for example, I'm not considered unemployed, even though I don't have a paying job. If I were looking for a job, then I would be considered unemployed. I was sending out resumes, and I guess there's different rules about that. I really don't know. But many people just give up. They just say, it's just not worth it. Can't get a job. It's too hard. There's too many applicants for every open position. There's 100 applicants, and the jobs suck anyway. And I don't like to have to live on my parents' couch, or I don't like, having to, eat pasta with ketchup every night. But that's what I'm going to do right now. So economy not growing, not moving forward, except for really people who have investments. It's kind of another one of those jobless growth periods we've heard about. We've seen more of those recently. This is something the Democrats could take advantage of. And again, they're not. And this was a huge problem, and I talked about this when Biden was president. People would say, oh, look at the stock market, it's going way up. Biden's doing something right. No, just because profits are up for corporations doesn't mean Biden's doing something right. Doesn't mean the president is doing something right. Those profits could be coming out of the employees whose real wages are growing more slowly or not growing at all. So the company's expenses aren't growing nearly as fast as their revenues because they're not paying their workers enough. Or it could be because of oligopolistic pricing, where companies price their services or goods well above what would be the price if there was real competition. So a growing or skyrocketing or record high stock prices do not necessarily reflect a healthy economy that's working for all Americans. But I heard during the Biden years from many Democrats, I saw many memes, look how well the stock market's doing. Joe Biden is good for the economy. And they would say, well, and look, when Trump was president, the market collapsed. It's true in his last year it did, but that was probably because of COVID, or was because of COVID. So don't use the stock market as a proxy. This is my message to leftists and progressives. Don't use the stock market as a proxy for the American economy. Use the employment numbers. Use salaries, wages. Use the number of new. See, I think startups. I think that's more relevant. We don't have new people trying to build businesses today. There aren't that many entrepreneurs. It's just too difficult to start a business. Competition from established companies that have set the rules to make it very, very hard for anyone to challenge them have kept out folks who might want to do that. So we see fewer startups. Another metric, I think that, or another reason we're seeing the reduction in new companies is because people who have healthcare, who have a job, are just not going to leave it up. They're not going to give it up. As bad as many jobs are now in terms of the quality of work, the quality of life, the wages, people absolutely cannot afford to leave them. Economy isn't working. Democrats need to use this if they want to win. And they have to use it in the way I said. Hey, we aren't seeing growing wages. We need to see much more aggressive, by the way, antitrust activity also. Right? Break up these big companies. Again, another message we're just not hearing from this party. All right. I just thought this was a real good summation from CNBC here. It's fair to say that 25 was a hiring recession in the U.S. We just didn't see growth in the job markets. The U.S. is experiencing a jobless boom where growth is strong, but hiring is not. Great for Wall Street, but not for Main Street. An uneasy feeling. That's how we feel right now. If you had an opposition party that recognized that uneasy feeling. You saw it in the streets of New York, all those people cheering Mamdani. Is he going to bring us something different? The hope for change, you saw that. I don't trust the Democratic Party. There's no reason to believe they will. I don't trust a party where AOC talks down to people, tells them that it's basic, you don't chant in support of Hamas in a Jewish neighborhood while ignoring the context, which is outside a synagogue where land illegally stolen from Palestinians is being sold. That's not somebody that I trust to do what's right. And you know what? The fact that she's far from the worst actually tells you far more about the Democrats than it does about AOC. The fact that she plausibly can claim that she's better than a lot of Democrats, maybe better than most of them. What that tells you is just how bad that party is. All right, thanks so much for being part of Halitics. I will be back tomorrow, Thursday. Enjoy your afternoon.